Good afternoon. Welcome. As you all are coming on, we are so pleased to have you all join Outlook 2025 for small businesses. I'm Patricia McKinney, Director of Small Business and Member Programming with the Greater Memphis Chamber. Our mission with the Small Business Council is to empower, to advocate for, and promote the growth and success of small businesses in the Mid-South. As everyone is coming on, we do want to welcome you to add any questions that you might have to the chat, and we will get to them as soon as possible. This program and other programming through the Small Business Council is made possible by our generous sponsors, Independent Bank, Wyatt Tarrant and Combs, and Cigna Healthcare. So each of those sponsors are represented by amazing leaders. With Independent Bank, we have Paula Peckham; with Wyatt Tarrant and Combs, Matt Lubizinski; and with Cigna Healthcare, Jennifer Gaines. And they will come to us in that order. First up is Paula Peckham. Paula?
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Paula Peckham, and I am the branch manager of the Collierville location with Independent Bank. I'm
Excuse me,
very happy.
Paula.
Oh,
Could you turn on your
oh,
camera, please?
oh,
And everybody, once you're speaking,
sorry. I can
it's
see
okay.
you now, or
It's
you can
okay.
see me.
Yes.
Happy that you all have joined us today. We take the opportunity each time we meet, just to remind you that we would love to be your banking partner. We understand your needs are all unique to you, so we offer a variety of products and services for individuals and businesses of all sizes. We strive to be heroic every day, and we can and would be honored to help you meet your financial goals. Thank you again for being here. And if myself or any of my colleagues can be a resource to you or your business, we would love to help. So please reach out. Thank you.
Thank
Hello,
you.
everyone. I'm Matt Lubizinski. I'm a partner at Wyatt Tarrant and Combs. We are a full-service law firm, and we're excited to again be sponsoring the Small Business Council in 2025. So remember, unless it's family law or criminal law, feel free to give us a call if you have any legal needs. Thanks.
And Jennifer Gaines.
Get off mute. Hi, can you hear me now? I'm off mute.
Yes.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Jennifer Gaines, and I am the new business manager with Cigna Healthcare, located here in Memphis. I'm really excited. Wanted to make sure that all of you were aware of our partnership that we have with the Memphis Chamber in regards to your group medical insurance. We offer coverage to groups with 2 or more employees, really no limit on group size. We are offering special discounts to your medical premiums if you're a chamber member. And so we're really excited about this partnership. If you are interested, please consider us when your policy comes up for renewal, and reach out to your local agent that you work with, and they know exactly how to get into contact with me and submit a proposal. Cigna is a national carrier. We have the #1 network probably in the nation. So we're really look forward to working with you guys if you're interested, and please feel free to reach out.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sponsors. Maintaining a healthy business climate is essential for business growth, and leading that charge with the chamber is Bobby White, Chief Government Affairs Officer with the Greater Memphis Chamber. Bobby White.
Well, thank you very much, Patricia McKinney. I appreciate it. It's so great to have you all on. It's raining a little bit here in Memphis, but we are privileged to have the rain and not as much cold. But we're so grateful for the opportunity we have to partner with our small businesses, which we know make up the super majority of our members. And we're also very grateful to have our visitor with us today, our presenter, who quite frankly, has always been a dependable voice, not just for small businesses, but for our chamber, generally speaking, as we made our way through a pandemic and the back and forth that happens with changing administrations. I will say that our time getting together today is important as I see it from the standpoint that I know there have been a number of announcements and things that are happening in Washington. And I know that there are those conversations and concerns. And so please, please, please take advantage of the opportunity that you will have today. I know Patricia will introduce Tom in a moment, but please take advantage of the opportunity to ask these questions of Tom, because we're seeing so many things happen in Washington at the federal level, and he's just a trusted resource. So again, thank you so much. Thank you all for what you do. So happy that you guys continue to invest in the chamber. With that said, Patricia, thank you for the time. Back in your hands.
Thank you so much, Bobby. So we are extremely honored to have our speaker, Tom Sullivan. Tom is the Vice President of Small Business Policy at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, working with chambers of commerce and U.S. Chambers nationwide network. He harnesses the views of small businesses. Tom runs the U.S. Chamber's Small Business Council, engaging those members on a regular basis to increase small business input and involvement in chamber activities. Just to give a snapshot of his illustrious career, Tom was an attorney in the government relations practice of Nelson, Mullins, Riley, and Scarborough, LLP, a law firm with a major East Coast presence from Tallahassee to Boston. He also served under President George W. Bush as the highest ranking government official charged with exclusively advocating the views and needs of small businesses. Tom earned his Juris Doctor from Suffolk University Law School in 1993 and a Bachelor's of Arts in English in 1989 from Boston College. Tom, it is a pleasure to have you on. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Patricia, and also good to see you again, Bobby. Although every year I say, like, when are you gonna get me back down to Memphis? And here I am virtually again, and it's just a pleasure to speak with you. I'm gonna share the screen. All right, so I'm gonna start actually with a little bit of an acknowledgement to our sponsors today, and that is when I first met the Small Business Council several years ago. Dottie explained to me that, like, she was a small business. She didn't have a lawyer. She didn't have like a healthcare broker. She didn't have a banker, but she had friends, and she brought those friends together because the collective group could help each other out, be shoulders either to cry on or to rely on, and out of that birthed the Small Business Council. And so that type of background for me to hear, the law firm, independent bank, is certainly a big fan of Susan Stevenson, who I met when I first met Dottie, and Cigna, to hear just those three of many, many names as part of the sponsorship and partnership of the Small Business Council just really brings joy to my heart. So it's good to be with all of you. So first, a little bit about the U.S. Chamber and a little bit about what I do here. First of all, I get credit for all the stuff we do for small business, which is great. But I'll share a little bit of a secret. Like, I don't do half the stuff. I just get credit for it, which makes my job really one of the best jobs at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. We represent, as an organization, roughly 3 million businesses. That includes our partnership with about 1,600 chambers of commerce, like the Greater Memphis Chamber, from all over the country. I will add that the Greater Memphis is one of the founding chambers of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and it's something that I am reminded of every time when I walk through the front door. There's a giant brass plate on the wall that has the original chambers of commerce who created the U.S. Chamber of Commerce over 100 years ago. So that makes it extra special to talk with all of you today. Our membership also includes membership of about 500 trade and business associations, primarily based in Washington, D.C., also based in Chicago and some other places around the country. It should not surprise any of you. The vast majority of our members are small businesses. And so while I can't talk with every one of the small businesses every day, it sure is an honor to represent that massive group of small businesses. So I am going to forward the slide. I can. There we go. So what I'm going to cover today is really just kind of a snapshot of what we see nationally, and drill in a little bit of what we see in Tennessee, talk just briefly about some of our priorities at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and then answer questions. I should say that, Bobby was nice enough to say, like, look, pepper Tom Sullivan with questions today, which is fine, but I want to kind of share right back to my colleague, Bobby, and in just the assurance that just because you're in a different part of the country doesn't mean we're not connected. Bobby and professionals like him all over the United States really do interact on a frequent basis with folks here at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And in fact, when we move the dial on things in Washington, D.C., many times moving that dial relies on the strength of coalitions and coalition partners and chambers of commerce like the Greater Memphis Chamber. So if you think of a question tomorrow, you could always ask Bobby. There's over a 90% chance he's going to know the answer. And in that slim 10% chance he doesn't, he has friends here at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, me included, who we can always ping to get answers. So that's what we're here for. Doesn't matter who you contact, we'll get you answers. So first, national, let's look nationally. Now, since I can't talk with 3 million small businesses all the time, we try to take the pulse of small businesses through our quarterly index with our partners, MetLife. Now, I should make sure to be clear, this latest survey was taken right before the election, and I'm going to touch a little bit on national small business sentiment about what's happened after the election. And this is based on a weekly analysis that I do on data that comes out on small business every week. This data and analysis is posted on our website, usually Monday afternoon. If you were to Google U.S. Chamber of Commerce Small Business Outlook, up will pop in your Google search a weekly kind of bulletized brief of what's going on with small business. I try to capture the latest data, just updating that now for next week's. There was a Wall Street Journal Vistage poll that came out recently. So I'm going to touch a little bit on what's happened after the election, but for the main purpose of this discussion, we're going to talk about the sentiment leading up to the election. So first of all, if you look at this tracking, you'll see that the small business sentiment's decent. We'll say it's tremendous or low, but it's decent. And then I took a couple of highlights. 32% of small business owners are positive about the U.S. economy. I don't know about all of you, but 32 is not a passing grade. And so it seems like a low number, but please keep in context that there have been years where positivity is in the negative numbers. So the broader story about positivity in the U.S. economy is that the negative side of it has gotten less. People are less grumpy about the U.S. economy than they were a year ago. Now, it's fascinating because when we ask small business owners, okay, you may not be that great confident about the entire U.S. economy, but how do you feel about your own business? Businesses have been consistently positive about their own business. My theory on that is because small business owners a little bit more positive on things that they can control, or at least that they feel that they can control. And there are a lot of small business owners, no matter how hard it gets, they believe that if they worked harder and longer, which is impossible if you're working 21 hours a day, but a lot of small business owners have this positivity that they themselves can turn things around. That also leads to some heightened confidence in how they're doing themselves. Now, this really should not surprise any of you. The highest concern for 15 consecutive quarters has been inflation. Now, the good news is it's a little tiny bit less than 2023, but it's still really high. Or as they say, where I grew up in Boston, it's wicked high. This has changed a little bit since this index was put out. That little change has been that the salary expectations for new hires has dipped a little bit. And because small business owners really feel as though anything that costs more is inflation, salary and wage costs actually enters into how they feel about inflation. So inflation is going down a little bit, primarily because their employees are not as expensive, or at least the growth of expectations has been slowing down. We asked this past quarter about how small businesses feel about regulation. It's been creeping up slowly, and this past quarter has been that over half have believed that just the amount of rules and regulations, primarily coming out of Washington, D.C., have just made it harder to grow. And then, not surprising, small business owners get a little bit upset that while larger business competitors have entire compliance departments, like a tax department, regulatory affairs department, most of the time it's the owner themselves. And so that means that it can be harder, even when you have outside consultants. It's harder to comply with rules and regulations than some of their larger business partners. And that bore itself out in the data. About close to 70% of small businesses feeling like they've got a tougher road to hoe than their larger business counterparts. So now we get into the positive part about what's going on in small business across the country. If you look on the chart on the left, even if you didn't have Superman X-ray vision on the details, you could obviously see there's a big high amount on the right and a relatively low amount on the left. And then in between is the Grand Canyon. That Grand Canyon is COVID. And where it spiked back up is really only 4 months after COVID. If you had Superman vision and you were looking to see at how much time it took for new business startups to be on the rise after 2008, 2009 recession, you'd actually see that it took 10 years. It only took 4 months for small business startup growth to spike after the start of COVID. Now, the reason for this, there's two reasons. One that I don't like to really talk about, and then one that I really like to talk about. The one that I don't really like to talk about is federal spending. Like the federal government spent tons and tons of money to try to keep businesses afloat, and actually, more importantly, to pay their employees. Folks may think that I have a tattoo that says PPP from the Paycheck Protection Program. It's not true. I do not have that tattoo. But we worked with the Greater Memphis Chamber and hundreds of chambers around the country to try to explain how to access pandemic relief. And that helped boost new startups. The second reason that I do like to talk about, though, is why there are so many new small businesses is in part because businesses solve problems. And never in our recent history has there been a more intense set of problems to be solved. And so small businesses and entrepreneurs kind of swooped in, and the numbers of new businesses spiked. And the data bear that out. Actually, in the first several months of high new businesses, they were primarily in transportation, logistics, and warehousing. And as much as we all love FedEx because of their presence in Memphis, they could only deliver so many packages. And to kind of fill in that gap, small businesses and entrepreneurs did what they do best, and that is create solutions and grow. That tailed off a little bit where the logistics and warehousing especially started to morph into online businesses. But we still see, even today, we still see more new businesses started on a monthly basis than we did before the pandemic. Now you'll see when you look at Tennessee, it's not as important to look at the slim ups and downs that look kind of like an EKG. It's much more important to look at what happens after the spike compared to what happened before the spike. And as long as that what happened after the spike is higher than what happened before, then economies are doing pretty well. And you can see the overall business applications are really high. The applications for businesses with new employees is a little bit lower, but still above pre-pandemic, and that bodes well for the economy. So when you look at all these dynamics and you try to figure out, like, okay, so what are we going to do in 2025? What's our agenda? We look a little bit back at 2024, where a lot of our activity were trying to push back on overregulation from the federal government. The way Suzanne Clark, who is my boss, and she was a former small business owner herself, she likes to say that, you know, the worst thing that the federal government could do is try to micromanage small businesses. It just doesn't work. And so many times we went to court to say that these agencies were overstepping their appropriate role in the economy. I'll give one example, and this lawsuit continues, although we're pretty positive that the new administration will resolve it. The Department of Labor took the lead from the state of California in trying to have independent contractors classified as employees for their largest clients. And that just doesn't work with small businesses. There are so many small businesses like my wife's business who want the flexibility of being their own boss. They don't want to be beholden to one client and draw salary and benefits from that client. And taking that choice away was offensive to many businesses. It was part of a law that the U.S. Senate stopped. Part of a bill. Sorry, Bobby, I didn't mean to mischaracterize the legislative process. It was part of a bill called the PRO Act that the U.S. Senate stopped. But Department of Labor actually implemented this provision anyway, and we took them to court saying, you know, actually, you do have to pass something into law before you implement it, and the courts are trying to sort that out. That's just kind of one example of close to 20 lawsuits that we filed to try to push back against overregulation. So when we look at 2025, we're looking at a deregulatory climate instead of a regulatory climate. And the biggest agenda item for us is to take the provisions of the 2017 tax reform that are pro-growth and trying to reauthorize those past 2025. There are some provisions within that 2017 tax reform that have already expired. One of them being the immediate expensing of research and development expenses. It has really been a punch in the gut for many small businesses. The other that expires at the end of this year is a 20% deduction for small businesses. My boss explained it pretty well yesterday on a webinar that right now, roughly speaking, small businesses pay 29% margin rate. And if this 20% pass-through deduction does not get extended, most small businesses will see their rates immediately jump to 39%. And that's terrifying. And so we have a year-long campaign already started where we are just simply trying to impress upon lawmakers what that deduction means. what it means to hiring new employees, what it means to providing benefits to existing employees, what it means to growing your business for the benefit of the community. All of those things depend on the cash flow that a 20% pass-through deduction helps make happen. We're actually particularly focused on senators like your Senator Marsha Blackburn, who sits on the Senate Finance Committee. She will have a key role in reauthorizing the pro-growth provisions of the 2017 tax law. Now, don't worry, I'm almost done. We'll get to questions and hopefully answers. But one last thing I want to make sure that folks know is the availability of our small business digital platform called CO, just C-O. This digital platform is intended to give answers to questions that small business owners may have on a whole host of issues. But the answers don't come from me, they come from other small businesses. It's a really neat platform where the content takes issues like what are some of the most popular new business ideas? How do you access grants and loans? What does SEO, search engine optimization, mean for a small business? This digital platform answers those questions from the narratives and experiences of other small business owners, which tends to make it a very powerful platform. I go to the site frequently to get answers to questions that small business owners ask me, and I encourage all of you to use it as a resource because that's what it's there for. I'm going to stop sharing, and then I am going to go to the chat to see if there's any questions. Oh, let's see. Dottie was nice enough to greet me back. Thank you, Dottie. And then Mr. Hernandez asks, how do you get in touch with me? Well, there's a couple of ways. My email is tsullivan@uschamber.com. That's tsullivan@uschamber.com. Or you can just call Bobby or Patricia, and they'll connect you with me as well. I also have a social media handle at smallbizpatriot. And during my free time, I try to populate the social media world with pro small business stuff. Dottie is asking about the minority women-owned or disabled-owned certifications, light of the new administration's edicts around DEI. Are you seeing any pushback? So, Dottie, thank you for the question. I think the answer that many of you already know is that the actual changes in certifications have been a challenging time actually for about 2 years. There are a series of lawsuits that challenge the constitutionality of making government assistance available to businesses based on their race or gender. And so SBA, for instance, has been trying to make their 8A certification compliant with legal orders. That continues. Now, is President Trump, by his executive orders, kind of pouring gasoline onto that fire? Yes. But I want to make sure folks know that the changes are not new. They are just sped up by President Trump being in the White House. These are ones that have been percolating for about 2 years. And I think that direction is instructive into how things will be handled. So, for instance, 8A certification. So now there is a process in 8A where you have to map out how you consider yourself disadvantaged, which is very different from prior to legal action. It was just by the designation of your race or gender, you were deemed to be disadvantaged. And so changes like that will continue. They'll be sped up under the new administration. Yesterday was the confirmation hearing for Senator Kelly Loeffler from Georgia to head SBA. And having had a chance to meet with Senator Loeffler, she answered very tough questions the same way that Dottie asked me. And she said she is going to do everything she can do in her power to meet the president's objectives, which was kind of a non-answer because they tried to kind of pin her down, like 8A is the law and President Trump has an executive order. So which are you going to choose? And she wouldn't be pinned down on that. She simply responded consistently, I'm going to follow the law because I take an oath to do that. And B, I work for President Trump and I am going to follow his direction. So not the answer that I think Senator Markey wanted to hear, but if I were advising Kelly Loeffler, that's exactly how I would have her answer the questions. So I have another question from Ms. Bradley. As an employment agency, we have a hard time finding work for employees with businesses slowing down or closing. Do you think this year might be better? So Christina, I think that this year will be better. The data that I see coming after the election show enormous desire to grow and enormous desire to hire up in that growth. Now, it's spiked in what I would think would be an overreaction immediately after the election. The latest data that I saw as early as 2 days ago, it slowed down a little bit, but it's still above pre-election levels. So if you were to look at plans for growth, including employment growth, before and after the election, right now it's still higher than before the election, which I think is the way to answer your question. Now, obviously, there are sector differences and regional differences, but from a national perspective, this year is going to be better from a small business hiring perspective.
And Tom, I'm going to jump in and just help with some of these, kind of just
Sure, thank you.
looking through the question list. There was also a question here from Michael Detroit regarding small businesses or nonprofit companies. What percentage of nonprofits are repped by the U.S. Chamber? And are there nonprofit professionals working at the U.S. Chamber? Are there nonprofit resources available through the U.S. Chamber?
So we are a nonprofit. Not 100% sure what the question means. I'm a nonprofit professional, like everyone at the Greater Memphis Chamber is. We have a training program for nonprofit professionals. It's called Institute for Organizational Management, IOM, where we are in 4 college campuses for 1 week every year. It is a 4-year program. I am an IOM graduate, and we work very closely with 500 associations. They are all also nonprofits. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but we do a lot of work with nonprofits, but we don't necessarily lobby for nonprofits. We lobby for businesses.
Yeah, and I'm just building on that. I'm wondering, do you keep track of your membership and to what percentage those members might be nonprofits?
So I'm a lawyer, which means I'm terrible at math. But if you let's see, there's 3 million business members, and there is roughly 2,000 nonprofits. So I don't know what that percentage is.
Okay, so there definitely some nonprofit members.
Yeah, although I do have to make sure to distinguish like what we do for those different members. We lobby for a better environment for businesses to grow for our business members. For our nonprofit members, most of our value is the convening amongst association professionals so that they can gain from their experience. I would call it peer-to-peer convening for them. That's very different from the advocacy component that we focus on for our business members.
Yeah, thank you.
There are lobbying groups that do lobby for nonprofits. There's the Association of nonprofit executives, as well as associations that do specifically represent nonprofits, and those are pretty easily available on in a Google search, and they do really good work. I actually have been working with them a lot to try to figure out responsibilities under the Corporate Transparency Act, which has been nightmarish over the past several months, having to do with small businesses report beneficial ownership information.
Hello, Tom. I'm Larry Robinson. I'm
Hey,
also
Larry.
the co-chair of the Small Business Council with Meredith Hennessy. And one of the other questions was the DBE that the FAA uses is codified in law. The airport here doesn't believe that they will stop utilizing the DBE preference. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Can I be the third person you call to tell me how it all works out? Like, I mean, this has been going on now for about 2 years. The Minority Business Development Agency within Department of Commerce was sued as its preference programs were deemed unconstitutional, and that set a ripple effect. But just when it hits one piece, like whether it's MBDA or FAA or SBA, I think sometimes we think that automatically it's everywhere, and it's not. I mean, it's like, it's actually, the government is more like us as a small business council, is that something good or bad happens to one person, it doesn't necessarily happen to everybody. They do have a ripple effect. So as soon as MBDA, some of its programs were deemed unconstitutional, SBA did change its 8A program.
Okay.
But it didn't. I mean, there were some that said, "Oh no, like the entire program is going to go away." No, it didn't. It just they had to change from justification of being disadvantaged. It was no longer based on their race. They had to create a narrative in the application that says, "Tell us how you are disadvantaged."
Right.
And
I think that was
changed the application.
The SETI component about socially and economically disadvantaged entities or something of that nature. All right, we got one more question.
Yes.
As an employment agency, we have had a hard time finding work for employees this year with businesses slowing down or closing. Do you think this year might be better?
Yeah, and so thank you, Larry. Yes, this year's going to be better. We see signs, especially post-election, more businesses, large and small, are in growth mode. And when I hear growth mode, that doesn't just mean that everyone's going to have artificial intelligence. It means they're going to be hiring more people. So yes, this is going to be a good year for employment agency.
Tom, maybe while some of our other participants might be adding some questions to the chat, I'm curious, just going back to the data you shared with us. And I think there was a question at the beginning, just if you could share that URL again, that, where folks could go to kind of refresh and look for updates, that would be great.
Sure.
But related to the data that you're tracking, so that it was really helpful and interesting to see how the kind of new business applications have grown over time. And I'm curious if the chamber is looking at growth in small business revenue or, looking at kind of profitability. So that I'd be kind of curious to understand related trends, or if there's someplace you could point us to be able to look at that.
All right. So I love this question. Why? All right, I've got it. Oh, okay. So there's a Q&A. All right, here we go. All right. Here's why I love that question. So in our index, We do ask about revenue, but don't get into profitability. But a lot of other folks do. So, for instance, my friends at the National Federation of Independent Business that have been serving businesses now for 60 years, same set of questions for 60 years. So you can really see these kind of trends. They ask about profitability, and then they ask about revenues. And just to kind of nerd out a little bit for a second, we have seen optimism in revenue for about 9 months going up, slowly and surely. And actually, faster for male-owned businesses, a little bit smoother for women-owned businesses. But still, the idea that 2025, you're going to see more revenues has been growing for close to a year. However, the profitability has stayed the same or actually shrunk. Now, you don't have to be an economist to know, well, that's because of inflation. So the higher inflation is, you may have all the revenues in the world, but if you've got a thinner and thinner margin, you're losing money. And so that we've seen that nervousness about inflation. And in fact, our friends at Intuit QuickBooks have a survey, and they've been tracking revenue for about 10 years now. And I keep pushing them, like, you got to have profit in there. And there's a little bit of a sensitivity to the word profit, because unfortunately there's some corners of the universe where profit is somehow looked at as a dirty word. From us at the Chamber, and I suspect this is the same at the Greater Memphis, like, profit to us means reinvestment and growth. But I think our friends at Intuit were a little sensitive to having a column in their survey about profit. And I tend to be fairly persistent, so I think I'm wearing them down. I think you're going to see, they're not going to call it profit, they're just going to have costs. And so you'll be able to kind of back end the information about whether or not businesses are more and more profitable. But that revenue increase, we've been looking forward to revenue increases for a long time now. What we don't know is whether or not that's actually going to result in profits. We certainly hope so. Fingers crossed.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. We've got a couple more questions rolling in. I think just kind of moving from the top. I think there was a request just to clarify. I think some of the questions you responded to around like DEI and certifications, and then noting that that's been in the works for 2 years. But I think also maybe I think also what happened this week in terms of the administration announcement that all federal grants and loans were on pause and then coming back. So just if you can maybe make a distinction between what's in the pipeline from 2 years versus like what's happening today.
So thank you. So first of all, I'll give some advice on dealing with the kind of policy announcements from this administration. And we've forgotten a lot in the last 4 years, but then we were reminded very quickly. When President Trump makes an announcement or is fairly provocative, which he's prone to do, like, we all got to take a deep breath. We just do. Like, now, if taking that deep breath means like texting Bobby or calling me, then that's okay. But we still do have to take a deep breath. And no time was this more obvious than what happened last weekend. Like, Saturday afternoon, all of a sudden, the country of Colombia says you can't send migrants on a plane, and we're turning the plane around. And President Trump says, "Oh yeah, well, we're putting tariffs on you." And then like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, who does a lot of work on international trade, like, we had people working like for 24 hours on this craziness. And you wake up Monday morning, it's all resolved. Like, they came to an agreement. They put their guns away that were at the OK Corral. They put them away, and now we have a good relationship again. So there is some value in kind of taking a deep breath. Doesn't mean don't do anything. It just means like just kind of chill out a little bit. And my colleagues at the Chamber, not only from last weekend, but from the last 72 hours with that OMB memo, like, we're learning that lesson again, big time. So that's like advice number one. Number two is, yeah, there's going to be some changes. I mean, I think in any of the preference program, and I know that our friends at the Greater Memphis Chamber are, in particular, you have a great relationship with NABO and WeBank. Like, they know that there are going to be some changes, and there are going to be changes in DBE and others. We don't know what they're going to be. We just know that there are going to be changes, and that can be stressful, really stressful. It invokes anxiety, stress, all of those things. Now, to the extent that you have a community to lean on each other, that's a good step. What we're trying to do here is to try to really dig into the value of small business, from what's the value of small business to the owner, what's the value to their employees, what's their value to the local community, what's their value to the national economy. We've been really digging into those values, and then when something comes out, like, I mean, gosh forbid someone comes out with a statement that says, you know, small business no longer has access to any loans through a government agency. Like, what will, that's not going to happen, but let's just say, like, I mean, that'd be a fairly bold announcement, considering that's the core of the Small Business Administration. But what we would do then is we would go into the values. We'd call up Bobby and say, Bobby, can you get with Senator Haggerty and Senator Marsha Blackburn and like, let's talk about these values and let them do what they do best, carry those values forward to the Senate and other, like, from a strategic initiative to push back on things. So that's what we're doing. And I was lucky enough to bump into my friends in Madison Service. So there's a lobbying firm called Madison Services. They represent NABO. I think they might have lobbied with WeBank. Ann Sullivan founded the firm. No relation, but because of the same last name, we've become good friends. And her daughter Lizzie Sullivan, is really active in WeBank and NABO worlds. And we were talking about this very thing. And she's leaning into, okay, I really got to dig into is, what is the value of a woman-owned business? And when there's pushback on certification, for instance, they come in with their value first and allow Senator Marsha Blackburn to do what she does best. And then hopefully at the end of the day, folks come to compromise. But simple answer, Meredith, is an agreement with you. Yes, there's going to be change. It's just how we strategically prepare for it.
Yeah. And I think maybe just kind of a follow-on question to that. Thank you, Tom. That was very helpful. I think that there's another question here around, with that kind of anticipation that there will be change. And this just, again, might be about the U.S. Chamber or your kind of colleagues and partners in this work. Is anyone doing some projections around how, this kind of potential change in certification could impact, the growth of the minority or women-owned businesses?
So Meredith, we have not done analysis, nor will we, based on specific sectors or demographics. We have great admiration and partnerships with all sorts of folks who, the manufacturers, the service industries, Black-owned businesses, Hispanic-owned businesses, women-owned businesses. But we never, like my teenage boys, I never say which one is my favorite. However,
you don't have a favorite, right?
No, we don't have a favorite. Equal. They're all our favorite. What we are doing, though, is we're saying, okay, like, we're going to let NABO advocate for, of course, for women business owners, for instance. What we're uniquely positioned to do is to say, what's the number? What percentage growth puts sustainable, puts our economy on a path for everyone's better quality of life for every employee, every business, every community. Is we've really focused in historically on the importance of sustained 3% growth. This is this huge kind of growth and opportunity initiative that Suzanne, who is a small business owner herself, she's our CEO, you really focused in on that at a 3% sustained growth of GDP, someone born tomorrow will have their standard of living double by their early 20s. At 2% growth, so only 1% difference. At 2% growth, where we've kind of trickled in the last 10, 15 years, it takes till their late 30s to get to that same doubling of the living standards. And so what we're trying to map out right now is what has to be done for that sustained 3% growth. And we've really actually really weighing in on two things. One is you've got to minimize regulation, because simple things like getting permitting approval at the federal level are no longer simple, and that's driving inflation. The second, though, is the pro-growth tax policies. We don't view extending the 20% deduction as a cost. We view it as the fuel for economic growth. And when you look at growth projections and the amount of revenues that come into the Treasury with those deductions extended, that's not adding to the deficit, it's lessening the deficit. So those two things, deregulatory and extending pro-growth tax provisions, are really our main two areas of focus. And then, of course, we're doing 200 to 300 other things at the same time, just like the Greater Memphis Chamber is doing. But that's how we're approaching it. And we are trying to be sensitive to the individual challenges that different groups, but then try to give air cover, if you will, to that broader economic growth narrative that we believe is so important.
Yeah, that's terrific.
Fantastic. We got it.
Oh,
You got
go
it.
ahead, Larry. You jump in.
Okay. Well, we have one other question, Tom. Is it safe to apply for small business grants from government agencies?
That is a great question. Yes, it's safe, but it's not necessarily dependable. And the reason I say that is because it is embarrassing living and working in Washington, D.C., where every year for the past 6 years in September, we predict a government shutdown. And so I know that's not directly answering your question, but it's like, gosh forbid you get a contract on September 5th, and then all of a sudden government shuts down, and you've relied entirely on that contract for your entire business. Like, I think the federal government and aid from federal government, whether it's a grant or a contract, that's a great part of the business plan, but it cannot be your entire business plan, because unfortunately, the way sometimes we run government. So I hope that answers your question. Yes, it's safe, but it's not 100% dependable.
Now, with you guys doing with us as a country and the U.S. Chamber doing so much work internationally, what is the U.S. Chamber's position on tariffs that President Trump?
We're out of time. Oh, sorry, we're out of time. Thank you for laughing. All right, so our position on tariffs is that tariffs play a role when they are surgically applied to specific instances where other countries are taking advantage of U.S. exporters or importers. We do not believe that broad tariffs across the board are a good idea. We believe that they will drive costs up, otherwise known as inflation.
Right. Got you. I think that's all the questions. Meredith, do you see any more? One more. Dottie.
Yeah.
Can he share the Small Business Bill of Rights?
Yeah, sure. Sure.
that we can see beside Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I will simplify the Bill of Rights, but also share that with Patricia. It basically says to the U.S. government, like, leave me alone. That's it.
Yeah.
That's my short summary, but I'll send it to you. It's kind of a fun project that we've engaged in, and really tried to be our North Star on when we're weighing different legislative or policy ideas. We try to fit them into our Bill of Rights to see whether we give thumbs up or thumbs down. But I'll send it to Patricia.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's it. Patricia?
All right, Tom, thank you so much for shining some light and giving the clarity that's possible during this time as we navigate through uncharted waters and everything that the U.S. Chamber does to help chambers across the country. We really appreciate you. And Bobby, are you still on the call? I wanted to see if you had any lasting thoughts before I make an announcement for our future events. Okay. So again, thank you very much, Tom. Thank you to everyone for being on this call. Thank you to our sponsors, Independent Bank, Wyatt Tarrant and Combs, and Cigna Healthcare. We hope to see you on the 20th of February. That is our first in-person event where we will be diving into how to create your competitive advantage. That is going to be a masterclass led by Daphne Large, who is the CEO of DataFacts, and she is also a Chairman Circle investor. So she's going to be sharing with other small businesses of how to make your business stand out. That is going to be held at Baptist East at 11:30 on the 20th of February. Again, thank you all so much. We will be sending this recording out to you. And Tom, I look forward to getting that synopsis of the Bill of Rights that you're going to send to me. And Tom, whatever information or whatever contact information that you put in your email, I can send in to my follow-up, right?
Oh, of course. Yep.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Thank you all so much and have a great rest of your day.